Okay, this is another one of my books. This one is called How to Raise IQ and Become a Genius. Now, most Americans are kind of low IQ and brainwashed, and they get very offended by talking about IQ. As Jordan Peterson had said, IQ is the most reliable thing in all of psychology. It's the most reproducible. It's about solving random problems, okay? And it's the best predictor of academic success and career success. So I would say instead of being scared of it and being a wimp about it, why don't you learn about it? And also, I'm going to talk about genius. Genius is something I wanted to become a genius. And also, I had to deal with very intense academic competition that I was not well prepared for. In high school, I never even took an honors class, and I wasn't that great of a student. I always, in my mind's eye, thought of myself as an athlete, and I had fully predicted, I'm going to become a national champion, and then I'll coach at a Big Ten school, probably Iowa. That was what I envisioned as my future if you would have talked to me when I was a sophomore in high school. Then I got injured, and I was no longer recruited to the best of the wrestling schools, and Stanford still offered me a scholarship, so I took it and I went there, and I had never even heard of Stanford. So I was from Chicago. I had to very quickly become a much better student, or I wouldn't have made it. And I got like B minuses my first semester, and I didn't get any C's, I didn't get any A's. And I was afraid I was going to flunk out because I'd only took really easy classes the first semester. I knew I wasn't ready for the hard classes. So anyways, I intensely wanted to become good at it, especially when I got injured again in wrestling. Then I'm like, oh my God, I might not be an athlete as a career or a coach. I got to do something academic. So I really wanted, and I felt bad. I was pissed off that it was my fault for coming back too soon, getting re-injured. All my high school buddies kind of looked up to me and expected me to be an All-American national champion, and I had disappointed them, disappointed myself, disappointed my father that I wasn't as good of an athlete as everybody had predicted I would be in college. I was still decent. I was student athlete of the year at Stanford, set the school record for wins, but I was no longer great. So anyways, what I'm trying to say is, I then started to recognize, well, I was lucky enough that I also had a career to really be good, a chance to be really good at academics. And people say, well, you shouldn't talk about academics, you shouldn't talk about IQ. And if that's the way you feel, you could piss off, okay? We're going to talk about it. If you want to become wealthy, you have to talk about money, okay? If you want to become good at anything, you got to talk about it, you got to think about it. Like I know the guys who are really good at wrestling, they would talk about it all the time. That's how you get good at something, is you think about it, you analyze it, you work out the nuance. Okay, so this book is going to start out by talking about what is a genius, and also where did this book come from. I had previously already written several books on study skills. This came from after I had raised my own children. There was a lot of arguments between my wife and me about how to raise kids. And my wife, when I say wife, I mean ex-wife. She is also a doctor, but she came to medicine from what I would call a materialistic point of view. She grew up kind of in a poor family, divorced parents, and for her, America was the land of opportunity. She grew up in communist Poland. She said when she walked into the classroom, you have to salute a picture of Lenin, okay? And for her, this idea of come to America, do whatever you're told in school, get a good grade, then you can get into a grad school and become a doctor, then you make money. And then you don't have to be poor, like one of these starving poor people in these communist countries. They're really starving. For them, it's a big deal just to have, toilet paper, okay? So that, though, is what I would consider a materialistic point of view. If you have a materialistic point of view, that can motivate you. A lot of people, they grew up in poverty, and they're real motivated to not ever be poor again, okay? But I'm not talking about getting by. I'm talking about being the best in your class in medical school, being the best in the United States, the best in the world. And if you're going to achieve at a higher level, some people, maybe they're gifted with a genetic, fantastic IQ, but most people, they got decent ability and then they have to develop it. I'm talking about what's the maximum you could do to develop your ability. And I think a lot of it comes from a psychological mindset and sort of an abundance mindset, as has been called also a growth mindset, like Carol Dweck's point of view, the Stanford psychologist. All right, so when I get into this here, I'm going to start talking about things that really enlarge the scope of what you could do. And again, the wife tends to have the mother a lot more influence on children than the father does when they're young. As the kids get older, they tend to look more to their father as a role model, especially the boys. But I think my wife set my kids back a lot with her materialistic mindset. We would argue about things because she just simply couldn't understand my point of view. To her, it was a Hollingsworth gap. When you're more than 30 IQ points above somebody in a given domain of topic, it's hard for the stupider person to understand the smarter person, and quite often the stupider person will sabotage the efforts of the smarter person. I got to go work. I got 5 OR cases the next day. I can't sit around and see that the kids are following out my example. But I'll just tell you one thing. My kid was real into Steve Irwin, the Crocodile Dundee nature guy with the zoo and stuff. He's brilliant. He's funny. He's nice. And so I was teaching the kid, we go bird watching, then I take him to the zoo, we look with binoculars, we analyze the animal's behavior, we take photographs of the animals, and then I showed him how to make a PowerPoint talk, how to make a video, how to, synchronize the slides and all this stuff. And I was teaching him how to make a movie, make something beautiful and creative, with the idea that by enjoying that and the pleasure that comes from creating something good, it'll inspire him to apply that to other situations. And he took a drawing class and he drew Steve Irwin, he drew the alligators and all this stuff, and it was all good. And she was kind of like, what the hell does a little 4th grade kid need to know about PowerPoint? What's this artistic BS? The kid's going to end up, living in an apartment, being a starving artist in New York City, probably become gay or something with this crap. Don't waste the kid's time with this crap. And I'm like, you don't understand. We're trying to create something beautiful and special. It's good. Just when it comes to academics, let me handle it. But anyways, I share these things with you. So this basically, I've seen parents who really wanted to help their kids develop intellectually. Like, look at the father of the Polgar sisters who became the chess champions. So I'm going to go down that path in this book. If you don't want it, fine. You don't have to listen to it. But this is especially for people who really want to develop either incredible academic ability in themselves, or who want to help their children to go way beyond their sort of, let's say, genetic capacity. Because everybody, let's say you got a baseline average IQ of 100. There's only so much you could do with that. But if you dramatically improve your cognitive function, and I believe you can increase your academic performance by about 30 to 40 IQ points if you train yourself and you have the desire and the motivation, but you got to want it. You got to want it big time. Okay, so I'm just going to read a couple pages in this first section. It's a big chapter, so we can't do the whole thing all at once, but we'll just get started here. Okay, so again, this is coming from the book, How to Raise IQ and Become a Genius. Big Mongol book. And this is coming from Johannes Kepler, the great astronomer. It does not matter if my book finds its reader in 100 or even 1,000 years. Has not God himself waited 6,000 years for a human mind to be capable of gazing on his creation with understanding? Okay, and that brings home a point, too, that comes also from Arthur Schopenhauer in his book, The Art of Literature. What he said is, most masterpieces of science and literature and philosophy, they come from individuals who wanted to do something great. Men who wanted to write a masterpiece book or make a masterpiece discovery, who realize that they will never get anything from it. No one's going to give them any money for their discovery. No one's going to buy their book. No one's even going to perhaps even know about it, but they wanted to do it. And when that motivation comes intrinsically, that individual is difficult to control, that individual is difficult to stop. They want to do it. It comes from within. It's not an external motivation for a grade or anything else, okay? And that's the mentality right there, what Kepler just said. Okay, here's a quote by Voltaire. Why do animals have brains, but plants do not? Because animals move. And I think that's a big component of being smart. So you want to be in physical shape. You want to eat a healthy diet. You want to get your sleep. And you want to exercise a lot. A lot of the best athletes, I have friends that are college professors, they'll tell me most of their best students, they're also exercising a lot. They're fit or they're playing sports. And that was pretty much the prototype male student at Stanford, was a student athlete. Most of the kids had played sports in high school, and they weren't good enough to play in college, but they were still pretty athletic. Okay, what is the purpose of the human brain? To walk down a path in a forest or a jungle and survive. It is adapted to the real world. And you've got that left brain that pays attention to details, like eating little pieces of bread off the ground, but it's got that right brain that pays attention to the holistic situation all around them, that it doesn't get attacked by prey. It maintains its external awareness. And you need both the ability to focus on a detailed individual thing as well as a holistic comprehension of what's going on to be safe, to avoid predators. Okay, the next question. Why do humans belong in a separate kingdom from apes? Because humans have the power of speech. Tom Wolfe, Kingdom of Speech. So what we're doing here is we're kind of understanding the brain, understanding how it all works. Because what we really want out of all this is to become the big dog, the big dog. And I would know it. Like, for example, when I was a freshman at Stanford, I was scared I was going to flunk the class. I was nervous. I didn't know what to do. Had no training in memory techniques. I had no training in study skills. But after I learned all these things, memory techniques, study skills, approach to class, pre-reading, condensed notes, walk and talk, I would just walk into a class, like let's say my sophomore year of med school or when I was a resident. I would just know I was the best in the room, that no one was even in my ballpark. Okay? There had been no change in my brain. There had been no intrinsic increase in my IQ, but there had been a tremendous increase in training of my study skills, my cognitive skills, and my approach to a class and to learning. Anybody could do it. They just have to want to do it. Okay. Language is the Rubicon that divides man and beast. Rubicon was the river that Julius Caesar crossed when he came back to Rome after they called him back, and he brought his legions with him. And he said, "The die is cast. Fate is on the run. We've done it. We're coming back." Okay, next quote here by Jose Ortega y Gasset. He said, "What is the most advanced form of language? The metaphor. It is the most fertile power possessed by man." And then Aristotle had something to add to that. Ordinary words convey only that which we already know. It is from metaphor that we can best get hold of something new. It is the mark of genius to make good metaphors. To make good metaphors shows a skill for noticing connections. Yeah, and that's the best way to teach. A metaphor is like, this is something else. And by comparing the new thing to something they already know, that's how a person most rapidly can grasp what the new thing is. With a concrete metaphor, you really learn rapidly. Okay, next question. What is the difference between an average person and a genius? A genius learns their topic so well they can create something new. Okay, a genius is someone who can transform their field, according to D.K. Simonton, a genius expert. And so what I would say here is let's make a distinction. There's such a thing as a prodigy who learns the material fast and can get very good grades, and can, let's say, finish high school when they're only 14, 16 years of age. Okay, that's great. But that's not the same as a genius. A genius is someone who not only knows their field really well, can create something new. And even a higher genius is one who can transform the entire field. Okay, like for example, I'm a genius of neuroscience. I transformed understanding of neurodegeneration and of spinal degeneration. Okay, and somebody who can take a field and just make something new out of it, that's a genius effort. Okay, and so what I'm saying is being aware of these things. Once a student becomes aware of these things, I think lots of people could do incredible intellectual achievements, but they simply don't even believe it's possible, so they never try. Okay, how much can IQ be increased? If a person really devotes themselves to learning, they can probably increase it 30 to 40 IQ points in a given domain. Okay, so in a given topic. You have to learn what to do and you have to learn what to avoid. So here's a little quote. Learning what to avoid and what to do can start an IQ jump in you. Okay? You'd be amazed if you look at some of these parents like the Polgar sisters, where the parents specifically trained them to be good at something. The kids were incredible at it. Okay? With this good training, an average student can become an academic star, and a smart student can become a genius. Like I said, too, the average IQ, let's say in Americans, about 100. The average IQ of a doctor, I used to think it's 125. It's gone down since then. Doctors are getting stupider and stupider. So let's say the average IQ of a doctor, a physician, is 120. Well, you can take a person who's got a genetic IQ much lower than that, and they can function at that level and get through med school. Like, I don't think my wife's IQ is too high, but man, she worked so hard, she got through it, okay? Other people too, like I know some doctors that are really smart. They'll understand something as fast as me or faster than me, but I have like this giant knowledge database they don't have just because I've been trying to develop my brain. But what I'm trying to say is their genetic intelligence and ability to understand something is as good as mine or better. But like most doctors are functional illiterates. I talk to them every day. I know most of them, they don't ever read. They're too busy. Okay. All right, so here we're continuing. This is a quote coming from Alfred Binet, the inventor of the IQ test. He said, "The intelligence of an individual is not a fixed quantity. With practice, training, and method, we can increase our attention, our memory, our judgment, and become more intelligent." So the guy who invented the IQ test would say you can improve it. But then you'll have these BS artists, college professors like Jordan Peterson, oh, you can't increase IQ. Well, you can't increase IQ in a piece of crap college environment where you tell the kids, test on Friday, memorize this stuff, goodbye. If you give the implication that the material is meaningless and you're simply, a horse in a horse race just to get a grade, that doesn't inspire a person. But if you tell people, for example, I envisioned biochemistry as the language of God to write the book of life, and someday if I want to be a creative scientist or doctor, I must learn biochemistry. So I thought it was beautiful. I saw it as an opportunity. And my father, he's kind of a hard, rough guy, but he would say things to me that helped me. He said, listen, you little shit, you're lucky you get to sit here in a classroom and have an opportunity to learn all this material. A lot of young guys your age, when I was young, they were sent off to the front line. They don't get a chance to get educated. A lot of people, they're really poor. In Ireland, they're picking potatoes. They don't get a chance to sit in a classroom and twirl a pencil. Stop whining about it and consider yourself lucky. That was good for me. Okay, John Taylor Gatto, super teacher. He was like the best teacher in all of New York and other places. The guy's a brilliant, magnificent teacher. He wrote a bunch of books. They're well worth reading. His quotes are fantastic. Just look up his quotes. John Taylor Gatto, super teacher, one of the greatest teachers ever. He said, genius is as common as dirt. And he studied the 1800s. He said there was so much genius around, it's not even funny. People were actually smarter in the 1800s. They would read these big 600,000-page novels like, Charles Dickens' triple-decker novels. And a lot of creative things would happen. Nowadays, the school system dumbs people down. It's like a FICT system, of factory schooling, to make everybody conformist and sort of generic. But anyways, curiosity and love of learning are essential to really developing your brain. So to study what you're really interested in, because then you absorb the information very quickly. As Robert Greene had said, the author of the 48 Laws of Power, he says, you learn 3 times as fast when you are engaged. And that's also true. I noticed that in different areas of academics and wrestling as well. Some guy who really wants to learn, he's intense about it. That guy learns a lot faster than everybody else because he's in it. He's not just trying to go through the motions, he really wants it. Okay, so here's a quote by Albert Einstein. He says, most people think it is the intellect which makes a great scientist. They are wrong. It is character. And that's totally true. Because there's lots of smart people. There's lots of people, where is number 1 percentile in IQ? I don't remember off the top of my head. Probably about 135, 140 or something. Let's call it 140. So there's lots of people in that number 1 percentile IQ range. But how many of them ever get to be geniuses, okay? The ones that do extraordinary things, it's because they just have this passion, commitment, energy, intense desire that this is life, this is important, this is the best thing I can do, I'm going to go for it. So they're hyper curious, they're playful, they're almost childlike. Like I had a friend at Stanford, and man, he was getting A+ in the most difficult classes, and the reason was it was fun for him. He's one of the guys that got me going bird watching. And he had a friend who was a naturalist. We'd go bird watching with this naturalist, talking about all the bird behavior. And his naturalist, professor friend was explaining to us everything you'd read about in a textbook. And when he did it, it was so elegant and beautiful and connected. We loved going out bird watching with him. Okay? So that's a characteristic sign. They're kind of childlike. They're hyper curious. Samuel Johnson, curiosity is characteristic of a vigorous intellect. Albert Einstein quote, I am not especially clever. I am very, very, very curious. Following the questions out to their logical conclusions, extrapolating them out, turning them backwards and forwards, playing with the material. Those are all signs. Okay, Pyotr Wozniak, inventor of super memory system, he said, the rage to master is characteristic of a prodigy. They're the one pushing, not the parents pushing, the kids pushing when it's a real prodigy or genius. Okay, here's a good one. This is, I think this one's coming from Galileo or Schopenhauer. This one's Schopenhauer. It is not, he says, intellect is a magnitude of intensity, the depth of learning. It is not of extensity, the breadth of learning. This is why one man can know more than 1,000 1,000 fools do not make one wise man. Arthur Schopenhauer. Arthur Schopenhauer was great on the development of genius. There's a Galileo quote that's very much like this. Galileo said, learning is much more like a horse race than it is like pulling a heavy weight, such that a stallion can outrun 1,000 plow horses. Okay? And you know what? I think we're going to leave it at that for today with this Arthur Schopenhauer quote. Hope you found that interesting. If you're interested in intellectual development, I guarantee you we're going to go into the higher echelons of that subject. Okay, thanks.